There's no doubt the listeners out there have been exposed to chiropractic care. I'm a big believer in chiropractic care. But one of the reasons I want to interview Dr. Fogel is because not only is he incorporating chiropractic and corrective care, he's now utilizing functional and integrative approaches, which to me makes a lot of sense.
Trauma to the upper cervical spine leads to stress in the body. Stress is the number one thing that affects us. It's the number one killer. It's going to change our immune system. Once our immune system is altered, now we have a weakness and we're more susceptible to other things. Now you get an autoimmune condition. Autoimmunity always leads to cancer.
A lot of Americans don't even realize the correlation with certain injuries from a chiropractic perspective, how it can lead to all kinds of different disease processes.
Toxicity and nutrient deficiencies go hand in hand. If the person is equipped to detoxify and they're eating healthy and they're eating right and they're eating foods that are rich in nutrients, then I think their ability to detoxify is greater than somebody who doesn't.
Welcome to Rethink My Health Radio show and podcast, where each week we come from our studios in Atlanta, Georgia, talking about chronic disease, healthcare matters that matter most to you, your family, friends, and loved ones. And as I say time and time again, they do matter most to us, the practitioners, the research scientists, the doctors, the nurse practitioners, naturopathic physicians in the trenches, day in, day out, looking for root causes. We've been going over a series for the past 3.5 months talking about root cause. In the United States right now, our healthcare system is broken. We know that most Americans are looking for a better way, a more solid way. And this is why we want to take this time in this episode talking about functional medicine. What exactly is that? Corrective chiropractic care. I'll be introducing to you momentarily an expert in this field for the past 20 years, and really looking at nutritional imbalances. How does nutrition deficiencies, mineral deficiencies, play a role in corrective care from a structural perspective? You could have the healthiest system in the world, but if your body is not functioning properly, if you don't have the right amount of strength, the rehabilitation process as we age declines. And the research is clear that your movement is medicine to your body. Without moving, the body begins to atrophy, the body begins to break down. So we're going to be talking about holistic approaches. We're also going to be addressing metabolic disorders, which I think plays a huge role in what we're seeing right now in our healthcare system deteriorating. And integrative medicine is just good medicine. I'm Dr. Gez Agolli, your host on Rethink My Health, sponsored by Progressive Medical Center. Well, I'm excited. Dr. Kyle Fogel is with me, a rehabilitative chiropractic specialist physician serving Atlanta and Forsyth County for the past 20 years. Dr. Fogel is known as a leading expert in functional holistic, addressing metabolic, nervous, dysfunction, nutritional deficiencies, allergies, and much, much more. And Kyle's a personal friend. He actually worked here after he graduated from Life University. Dr. Fogel, thank you so much. Hey, take me back a little bit when you decided to become a chiropractic physician. I know you have a very interesting, diverse background where you were doing massage and you were doing holistic, and you've always been involved in fitness. So tell me a little bit about yourself. How did you get into this?
As a kid, I was always active, but I had years and years ago, and I recall as far back as I was like 6 or 7, I had fallen down a flight of stairs that weren't there. So if that makes sense, we were having our basement built out, and I'll never forget it. The guy who was building out the basement, his name was Steve, really cool dude, right? So anyway, every time that Steve came to the house, he would always have like pieces of wood that he cut off, and then he would have me build stuff. So I kind of had this, like, I guess, when you're a kid, you had this person that you idolize. So Steve was one of those guys. And so he was building out my basement, and they were putting in a stairwell, and he forgot to lock the door. So I would always run home from school after I got off the bus and go downstairs and be excited, like to see what Steve had in store for me to build. It would be like a boat or a car or something. I mean, he let me wear this like tool belt, and I thought it was like handy manny, you know. And anyway, so he didn't lock the door, man, and I stepped out and I fell down a whole stairwell, boom, right into the basement.
How old are you at that time?
I probably was like 6 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, so I was maybe 6. They took me to the hospital. They thought maybe something was broken at the ER. They did some x-rays. Nothing. They sent me back home. Probably within 6 months, maybe 7 months, maybe a year, I started to bedwet. I was already done with wetting the bed, right? So, I mean, it's not sexy. It's not like a fun thing to talk about, but we started bedwetting and, you know, it became a problem. And it went on probably till I was 8, 9 years old. And then finally, my parents got, you know, a friend of theirs said, hey, why don't you, there was no medication at the time for enuresis, right? That's what it's called. So they didn't know how to stop it. And it's kind of embarrassing. I'd go to friends' houses. I'd have to wear a pull-up. And it was really embarrassing. And kids would make fun of me, especially at school. I'd get into fights. And I went to private school. It's not something you did, right? I was fighting in a private school. I think I was in 2nd grade, and a good friend of mine at the time, it wasn't my friend. I just met him. His dad, his name is Doug Nemeth, and his father was Berg Nemeth. I'll never forget this. He was a chiropractor. So anyway, my parents took me there, and he did x-rays, and turns out that the x-rays at the hospital were perfectly fine. There was nothing wrong with it. But when they put the x-rays up on the view box, there was a scoliosis. There was a slight bend. And so he knew my history, and where L1 was, lumbar 1, the first nerve, he showed my parents that was pinching the nerve going to my bladder. So they created a game plan for us, you know, and it started getting adjusted frequently. We were doing all these therapies and modalities. And to make a long story short, the bedwetting ceased. It stopped completely. Right then and there, after all that, I mean, that just changed my life. And so I want to be a chiropractor, man. So
That's fantastic. That's a great story. That's a great personal story. I always find the best practitioners, the best physicians are ones that have a personal experience. And I know that that story resonates. Actually, I've known you a long time. Never heard that story. I'm not going to tell anybody about the bedwetting, by the way. But that's okay. So, so let's talk a little bit about that, Dr. Fogel, because I think that in your situation, right, you had that personal experience. It galvanized you to take action, and then you move forward with your life. But I'm going to jump forward right now because you have something called traditional chiropractic, and you're actually practicing rehabilitative corrective care. What is the difference, and why have you chosen that path?
I mean, first of all, that's how I got better, right? So that's the only thing I knew. And that's how I was treated. All the chiropractors that I had ever experienced in my life, in different points of my life where I lived in different places, went to school in Arizona State, things like that, was a competitive cyclist. All the chiropractors that ever sought out for care were the ones that did correction, right? They did corrective care. So that's all I knew. So the difference, I mean, chiropractic works no matter what. It's been around for over 120 years, if not more. And it works. But for me, my mindset was, you know, you're looking at the human body, you're looking at proper alignment, and the spine is a 3D model. And what they taught us in school, that it was really only 2D. It was 2-dimensional, right? And so in school, they had a club called Chiropractic Biophysics, so props out to CBP. And so I went to the club to learn this stuff, and it was just, that's exactly how I wanted to practice, man. So I knew that corrective care would be the model that I wanted, and I knew I wanted to, like, spines were my thing. I was like a spine geek. I wanted to understand the mechanics of the spine, why it shifts out of place, which we call subluxations, and that was the model that I followed. Other chiropractors, they adjust the spine, which is great. There's nothing wrong with that, and that's more for like relief care, but it's not correcting anything. It's correcting only one bone instead of the whole system. So one bone can come out of alignment, and that's what we learn in school. But what if all the bones are misaligned due to posture or some type of trauma? So that was the methodology that I incorporated into my practice, and I see miracles every single day in my office.
No, absolutely. And you know, I've known you for quite some time, and I've seen you as a patient myself, and I'm very impressed the way what you're assessing, and of course, correction. And there's no doubt that the listeners out there have been exposed to chiropractic care. I'm a big believer in chiropractic care. But one of the reasons I want to interview Dr. Fogel is because not only is he incorporating chiropractic and corrective care he's now utilizing functional and integrative approaches, which to me makes a lot of sense. And no criticism to other traditional chiropractors. I believe that because we have massive amounts of toxicity, massive amounts of deficiencies, at all-time high, we're seeing autoimmune diseases. And yeah, you can have a corrective spine, which is great, but you have to have a healthy patient as much as possible. So let's just jump right into this right now, because I know you've been studying nutrition, functional medicine. How do you incorporate it with your corrective care? I know that you've added this to your practice. You've been very passionate about it. How does nutritional deficiency, let's just start off with nutritional deficiencies, because that, a lot of doctors, a patient comes in not feeling well, and no disrespect to these primary care doctors, they have only a few minutes with the patient, and they don't even learn nutrition in medical school, maybe 20 hours at most, if that. And they tell a patient to have a healthy diet, which, what does that mean, right? So how do you incorporate it? Why is it important for you? And why have you studied nutrition and functional medicine? And then we'll get into the functional diagnostics you use.
Because I knew the truth. Like, to me in school, they taught you the model of, a kink in the hose, right? So the kink in the hose was the nerve that if that was kinked, if you unkinked it, then that nerve goes to every organ, tissue, cell in the body, and you would let the energy flow back into the nerve, into the organs, into the muscles, into the tissues, etc. And the patient can heal. But what if the hose has dirty water in it? What if the hose has rusty water in it, right? So that, to me, when I use that analogy, that's your diet, right? You can have a physical subluxation from either trauma or poor posture, especially with today's day and age with text necking. And then you can have a chemical subluxation, right? That you're eating junk food, you're eating Cheetos and Tostitos and Doritos and processed foods. And then you can have an emotional subluxation, right? We know what a cat does or a dog does when it's scared. So it goes into a flexed posture. It's like a wilted plant or a wilted flower. So we know that, I wanted to incorporate, if once we unkinked the hose, that if the person's diet wasn't healthy, the tissue couldn't be fed properly. So the tissue wouldn't heal as well, right? There's one thing to address the bones, but then there's other things to address the muscles, the tendons, the ligaments. And if they're unhealthy, then nothing's going to be stable. The bridge has to be aligned, but the cables have to be fastened tightly. So if the cables aren't fastened tightly and the bridge is moving back and forth, are you going to drive over that bridge? No, so that's when I incorporated it. The body is very intelligent. The first place the body robs Peter to pay Paul are going to be in your gums. So dentists witness that all the time, right? Because the gums are very populated with blood flow. So there's a lot of oxygen and nutrients going into the teeth to support this living matter that are your teeth. People think that the teeth are dead. They're not. Same thing with the spine. You have massive, it's a matrix. So all that tissue, all those nutrients, they need to be, they have to go to the tissue to feed them. But the thing is you can live with a terrible spine. You can be unhealthy with a terrible spine, or you can be so-called healthy with a terrible spine. Either way, but when we look at the spine, we can see how fast the body's aging. And there are accumulative effects of trauma, posture, poor diet, lack of sleep, people not taking care of themselves that reflect this in their spines, but they don't see it until you shoot the x-ray, right? If you find a dog on the street, you want to know how old the dog is, the dentist will take a picture of the teeth to see the age of the animal. But some of these people that are young, and you take pictures of their spine and you look at their spine and they're 90 years old. So then you have to ask the question, what are they doing to themselves? Like, how come they look this age? Why is this spine showing an accelerated degeneration or accelerated aging process when on the outside they look great?
You've seen a lot of x-rays over your 20 plus career. What have you noticed when you began studying in the 90s and then practicing onto the 2000s up to 2026 on the younger individuals? Have you seen people in their 20s with terrible spines today that you didn't really see when you started?
Yeah, you'd see these pictures of spines, in school. We had to take x-ray classes and radiology classes and understand all this stuff. And you would see these spines that looked horrible. And today you're seeing it in younger kids, that you've never seen before. Technology has really catapulted us in many different things, in areas. And we have to be competitive with other countries. So, it's important to be, up to date on like the newest iPhone, the newest technology. And these kids are obsessed with it. They're trying to get away from it. So that flexed position is killing them. In our office, we say flexion is death, extension is life. If you look at like the pose that you want to display out to the world, it's like Superman, like Batman, like Wonder Woman. It has to be a strong pose. And they're now showing studies prior to TED Talks or anything like that. When you do a power pose, you're increasing testosterone, you're decreasing cortisol. So there's a lot of benefit to having a strong posture and a strong foundation, and these kids don't have it.
The kids don't have it. It's interesting you say that because recently we interviewed Dr. Charles Meekin, board certified oncologist, and I bring this up for a point. Although we're not talking about oncology, we can talk about oncology if you want to when we get more into the nutritional functional diagnostics. But Dr. Meekin said that he been practicing for 3.5 decades, and he, beginning of his career, never saw someone in their 20s and 30s. Of course, there was people with cancer, but he just didn't see it. And today, he said it's a very commonplace. So we got to ask ourselves why. So let me ask you a question. Give me your opinion. Why are you seeing these younger individuals, and we can talk about and debate this all day long, why, but I want to hear your opinion. Why are we seeing these type of x-rays and degeneration at such a young age when really this is advanced? This is usually somebody in their 50s, 60s, 70s. What is your opinion on that?
That's a great question. So one, I think it's the lifestyle that we live and also the environment. I believe that the soil is too weak today in this day and age to replete already depleted bodies. So these kids in utero, the mom is, and not to, knock moms out there. There are plenty of healthy moms, but I think that the moms, when they're having a baby, they're depleted. So they're robbing from the child, number one. And in utero, right? They have to feed themselves because the energy expenditure is greater when you're making a child in utero, right? And so I think that the child is born really kind of, let's say, incomplete, not per se, like, there's no deformity or anything like that. I'm not saying that if the child...
Let's just say disadvantage.
Yes, a disadvantage, perfect, right?
From a nutritional perspective.
From a nutritional perspective, correct. And so, and the brain is a very sensitive organ. It's a very nutrient-dependent organ. It's a very oxygen-dependent organ, and it's a very stress-sensitive organ. So, if the mom is already deficient, then that's very stressful for the mom. And so the child, unfortunately, is going to be affected or has it affected. In third trimester, the child's adrenal glands are fully functional. And if the mom's adrenal glands are already weak because she's stressed or she's depleted, then she's going to rob from the baby's adrenal glands. And so the baby is going to be born colicky. And that's what happens a lot of times. So then they're showing the transfer of toxins in the umbilical cord into the baby. It's over 300 chemicals that are given from the mom because the mom is sick. In other countries, they take care of the mom, they feed the mom, they in China, they make the mom eat, I think it's like 12 to 15 eggs a day because of the rich choline in the yolks. And here in this country, they tell you to stay away from eggs because they're bad for you. So why is choline important? Because choline lays down the neural tracks for the baby to develop, for its nervous system to develop. The first system in the body to develop is what? The spinal cord is a brain, right? That's it. And
autonomic nervous system. As a matter of fact, one of my professors in medical school said the most important thing is the autonomic nervous system.
That's it.
That's number one. He said, if you master the autonomic nervous system, you'll be the greatest doctor because you'll help your patients the most. And it's interesting you were talking about nutritional deficiencies, and that was one of your main reasons. And I agree with you. I'll add a caveat to that, and that's toxicity, right? But C. Everett Koop, who, for those of you who don't know C. Everett Koop, he was the Surgeon General back in the Reagan administration. And he actually declared war on the tobacco industry. And he was well known for that, by the way. He was the one that kind of responsible to bring in the accountability to the tobacco industry, right? So we don't have to talk about smoking's bad for you, right? We already know that. But what made him very interesting is that he talked about nutritional deficiencies and that he mentioned that the majority of diseases of elderly individuals was a nutritional deficiency. They were talking specifically vitamin C at that time and certain minerals. And I got a little bit of history. When I was studying and publishing my paper for my doctorate of public health, I actually talked about why healthcare is not working in the United States. And I brought it all the way back to the 1930s. Senate document 264 actually did studies in the 30s that there was less than 30 trace minerals in the soil. I don't even know what it is now. It's probably less than that, right?
NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium.
It's got to be low, right? Yeah. So minerals are the cofactors. Without minerals, you're not going to make vitamins. You're not going to make hormones. You're not going to make essential amino acids. So even though 4%, less than 4% are micro minerals in our body, they're very, very important. I mean, we can talk about minerals all day long, but you make a very interesting point, and I agree with you on the nutritional deficiencies. So now we talk about, so what do we do? Most patients either don't have a doctor. Most patients right now that I've spoken to are relying on their primary care doctor. The primary care doctors do the best they can, but they're not really trained in this area. Some of the new ones are talking more about this. And that's why I think it's important, if you're listening to us for the first time, it doesn't matter if you're living in Georgia, all over the country, United States, we're going to encourage you to really seek out a functional practitioner because it's important. This is an investment. You have to focus on the nutritional deficiencies, and then we'll talk about toxicity. I think it's very, very important to do that. And Rethink My Health podcast is all about education. We're not here to replace your doctor. We're not here to give you medical advice, information. We're here to really galvanize you to take action and hopefully spearhead a revolution. Right now, I believe we live in one of the greatest times, Dr. Fogel, for healthcare. Why do I say that? Because most Americans now are aware that the healthcare system is broken and they're looking for different options. And obviously with RFK now in charge of our healthcare, and he can be a polarizing figure. I think what he's doing is fantastic. I think what he's talking about when it comes to our food supply is really the conversation we need to have. And like Dr. Fogel said, there's other countries in the world that really focus on this. There's a reason why the United States is ranked like 42nd when it comes to aging, yet we spend well over 2.9, maybe $3 trillion now. That's like 18.9% of our gross national product. That basically means that almost 1/5 of every dollar we spend goes to healthcare. Where's that money going, right? It's certainly not going to root causes. Maybe they're trying to a little bit. So getting back, we got a few minutes before this break ends. You talked about nutritional imbalances. You are assessing a patient from a traditional chiropractic looking at x-rays. Talk about how are you assessing a patient for nutritional deficiencies?
Well, it's through an intake form. I'm going to ask a lot of questions, and again, a lot of times, the assessment is through what they tell you as far as the mechanism of injury. When somebody goes and pulls a sock out of a dryer and hurts their back, that's we're not built that way. We're a lot tougher than that. Or somebody pulls a dish out of the dishwasher and they can't walk. You know what I'm saying? Like, so there's some underlying deficiency that's causing weakness within the body. So, I mean, manganese is an essential mineral, right? The body needs it, but that strengthens tendons, ligaments. So if the body robs manganese, right, from those tissues, then it needs it for something else. Manganese, right, runs the Krebs cycle. Manganese does a lot of different things. You're right. I mean, the deficiencies are going to drive, I say, the injuries like that, right? And so I'll tell you a story. Years ago, there was a girl that came into my office, and she had cancer at a young age, just like you were talking about earlier. She was 28 years old, and she was so young. They'd never seen somebody so young have cancer like this. She had double breast cancer, but the mechanism of injury was she was 11 years old. She was a top gymnast, training really, really hard, very vigorous schedule with school, et cetera, and she hurt her neck. The neck was a life-altering, life-changing injury where she couldn't train anymore. By the time and it affected her, obviously, emotionally, mentally, physically, things like that, probably choices she made. By the time she was, I think, 17 years old, she came down with her first autoimmune condition. By the time she was 24, she had her second autoimmune condition. By the time she was 28, she had double breast cancer. So her skin was so sensitive and so youthful that when they were doing radiation and chemo, it burnt her skin. And so it scarred it, and so she couldn't move her arms. So she came into my office asking me if I can help her. I didn't know if I can help her. But anyway, she ended up leaving my office. She didn't accept care. But the point being is in our office, we say this: trauma to the upper cervical spine leads to stress in the body. Stress is the number one thing that affects us. It's the number one killer. It's going to change our immune system. Once our immune system is altered, now we have a weakness and we're more susceptible to other things. Now you get an autoimmune condition. Autoimmune conditions come in pairs. Autoimmunity always leads to cancer.
And it's interesting you say that because autoimmunity is on the rise. There's millions and millions and millions in America. We're going to talk about that. Hey, this is Rethink My Health, Dr. Gez Agolli, joined by special guest, Dr. Fogel, chiropractic physician, specialist on corrective rehab care from a functional nutritional perspective. Getting to the root cause is multifactorial. You have to look at all different areas and you have to start one step at a time. But that first step is to take action. Hey, we're back in a moment on Rethink My Health podcast, and we will talk more getting to root cause. All right, we're back, the Rethink My Health podcast. So talking with Dr. Fogel, and we had an interesting conversation. We're just talking about one of his patients that has been dealing with all kinds of issues. And you talked about the upper cervical area. I think it's fascinating that you can take a patient that's coming in for straight chiropractic. You know, a lot of Americans don't even realize the correlation with certain injuries from a chiropractor perspective, how it can lead to all kinds of different disease processes. And that's why you have to look at the entire patient holistically. But you mentioned autoimmune disease. Let's kind of talk there a little bit, because autoimmunity is on an all-time high. And I remember when we started Progressive Medical well over 27 years ago, and I actually met Dr. Bouquet, who started working for us. And Dr. Bouquet was telling me, this is back in the late 90s, where he said to me, leaky gut, which no one even knew about back then. He said gut issues are the number one cause for the majority, but especially, he said, especially autoimmunity. And, you know, I said, okay, I can understand that. And, you know, but I said, what about this? What about that? And I want to hear your opinion, because, yeah, you can give all these great nutritional therapies and vitamins and different things of that nature, but if you're not addressing the gut, how well is it working?
Doesn't work at all. That's the absorption, assimilation machine, right? So here's the thing. The first system, again, like we spoke about earlier, is the nervous system. Second system is going to be the immune system. Third system is going to be the gut, the GI tract. The GI tract is so important. You have as many spinal nerves, as many nerves in the gut as you do in the spinal cord, maybe if not more, right? So that feedback, that mechanism is so important. Right? Sensory nerves drive information from the organ into the spinal cord. Motor nerves drive from the spinal cord into the muscles, right? To me, if the body's under stress, when the spine is misaligned, right, there is a ideal model. In the spine, we have different planes, transverse, coronal, frontal planes. If the spine is misaligned, there's pressure on the cord. 3 millimeter shift creates 40 psi to the spinal nerves and to the structures. It just takes 1 psi to shut down those nerves. So what if those nerves are going to the gut? So the gut is not working, the tissue is not developing properly, or the tissue is not functioning well. So now the tissue is weak. And so now any weakened tissue, we know this, can harbor infection. Right? And so that's how infections stay. We're exposed to parasites, we're exposed to bacteria, exposed to viruses since the dawn of man. But why do these different pathogens embed in the tissue and cause the body to attack itself? It's because the tissue is weak, right? Not only is it weak from, I say spinal misalignments, because tons of those lumbar nerves go into the GI tract, but also from the diet, right? From chemicals. We're the only country that allows certain chemicals in our country. You go to other countries and they ban them, right? Skittles are banned in Europe. M&Ms are banned in Europe, but the food dyes are food additives. Other countries know better, but we don't. Why? I can't tell you, right? The FDA approves a lot of things. They were designed to protect us, again. So our kids are exposed to this stuff. And I think that's what creates the problem. And I think the tissue is so weak that the body starts to attack it because it doesn't want it there. The body doesn't want to be weak. The body always wants to be strong.
Strong and resilient.
Correct.
And, you know, when you look at tissue integrity, I think it's very important. The fascia of the human body, that's almost like a protective mechanism, which makes a lot of sense what you're talking about. So that's why leaky gut. So that's kind of gut permeability. Dr. Alicia Fasano did some studies on gut dysbiosis, and it was just really amazing how I heard one of his lectures, and he was talking about how the GMOs of today, right, compared to when they started even looking at genetically modified foods. I know it's hard to believe, but they started these genetically modified foods for countries in third world that had no food, right? So we're trying to do that for starvation, okay? And it just kind of spilled over. I call it Frankenstein food, right? Because it's void of certain nutritional benefits. But not only that, that we now have research and data that it's affecting the tight junctions of the gut. And I think it's really important to assess gut dysbiosis. And that's why at Progressive Medical, I know also you do, Kyle, look at certain testing as well. Because if you don't test, you just guess. And, you know, you and I can sit there all day long and tell a patient, hey, do this, do that. But once you test them and they see it, I think it moves them to take action. Because autoimmunity, as we both know, is a gateway to other serious, more advanced, I call this advanced chronic disease, because yes, it's chronic, which means long-standing, but it's advanced as well. So, you know, if you listen to this for the first time or you're getting exposed to functional integrative medicine, you know, we're talking about a lot of different areas. But I've always said, you do with what you can, what you have. Because, you know, a lot of individuals are going to say, well, does my insurance pay for this? Why isn't my doctor not telling me this? And, you know, these are really good questions, right? But really, when you look at our healthcare system is a sick care model, not a wellness care model. What we're talking about is wellness. And that's why I think you got to shift the priorities. Is that what you see as well?
Yeah, of course. Well, I mean, there's no money to be made in healthy people, right? So it's a business, so you have to understand that. And then I think doctors are there to help the patient, but just, you know, they don't expand their horizons. So getting back to, you know, the professor who you were talking about as far as leaky gut, tight junction, GMOs. I went to a seminar, I don't know how many years ago, and there was a book called Seeds of Deception, and he talked about GMOs and what it was going to do, how it was going to change us, alter our DNA, and create, you know, cancers and things like that. But now they're spraying glyphosate on everything, right? Everything's sprayed glyphosate, and glyphosate goes into the tight junctions and spreads them apart, and it causes leaky gut, right? So everybody has autoimmune. We have autoimmunity. The cells are designed to die. If the cells are weak, the body's designed to kill it and attack it and get rid of it, right? And that's what we want. Apoptosis is a natural phenomenon. Cells die. They have a lifespan, right? Red blood cells have a lifespan of 120 days. So the body's design is to clean up. But the problem is if you have the cleanup crew coming, and then the food you're eating is the rebuilders, but the food you're eating is junk, you can't rebuild the tissue the same way that it originally was. So then it continues to happen, and our bodies tend to break down even more. And so those tight junctions that should get tighter after the body heals it, now they get weaker and weaker, and so those junctions get bigger and bigger. Now we get exposed to different antigens and different foods and things like that our body doesn't recognize, and it looks at it as it's foreign, and that's what the immune system is supposed to do. So it starts to attack itself, right? So I always say this to my patient: how does a tsunami happen? The conditions just have to be perfect. You know, same thing with a hurricane or a tornado or anything like that, or a volcano. Every condition has to be right. So how does autoimmune conditions take place? Every condition has to be right, to some degree, really wrong. These, you know, people that have autoimmunity, it could be stress induced, it could be chemical induced, it could be environmental induced, it could be a pathogen induced, right? All these different things can create autoimmune conditions, and an autoimmune condition may not show itself up for years, just like cancer. We don't know. And then you guys do a great job, and I want to thank you for exposing me to all this stuff, because if it wasn't for you guys, I probably wouldn't practice like this. However, now they come to you and you run all these specialized testing, which medicine doesn't recognize or accept, and insurance doesn't cover it. And you find out what's the root cause and what's causing the problem, and then you can help them, right? So that in and of itself is worth what? The price of admission at the door. Because how many more years do you go not feeling well, being told that you're fine, your labs look good, and you continue like that? That's not, we weren't born to live like that, right? We weren't born to go through life being sick and tired, and and tired and wired, and all these different things that these people are experiencing. And you and I see it in the forefront because we see so many patients and we get to hear their stories. And the craziest part is they'll go to doctors and they'll look at the labs, right? And they're fine. And a lot of these people are tired of that and not accepting that diagnosis of being fine, or giving them medication just for a symptom. And so I think that's the era we're in. We're in this movement of people really taking responsibility for their health, and they're seeking out this type of care. And I think it's the right way to do it, because I think that's true healthcare.
I totally agree with you. And, sticking with the autoimmune for just a second, as I was listening to you, that's a great example. The immune system is doing its job. And what does conventional medicine talk about autoimmunity? They suppress your immune system. They're going to give you certain biologic. Now, certainly, if it's like an extreme case where your joints are on fire, because really it all boils down to inflammation, and they're trying to crouch the information. Maybe short term, I can understand, where you got to use certain steroids or some type of other therapy to block the immune system. But shutting down your immune system is not the solution long term. And we've seen so many patients that, as you mentioned, the immune system is so intelligent, doing its job. It's cleaning up, looking for these pathogens. But clearly, we believe as functional integrative practitioners that gut health is critically important. And then nutritional, as I mentioned earlier, nutritional deficiencies. But now we get into toxicity. I want to switch for a second about toxicity, in your professional opinion. So we can work at all these nutritional deficiencies. We can heal the gut. We can talk about different protocols. We can eliminate pathogens. But now we've got that toxicity. Give me your definition of what is a toxicant.
Well, foods can become toxic, right? That's why we go through different phases in the liver. The body takes, something and makes it more toxic in phase 1. And then in phase 2, it makes it more soluble. Then it takes it to phase 3. Right now, we know there's a phase 3 liver detoxification to get rid of it. So some people's livers are burdened, right? Or drink alcohol, it's a poison. Literally, it's a poison, right? It alters your brain and you can't function and you act all silly, right? And you can't drive, you can't, it literally changes the brain. So when people drink, okay, well, you're drinking poison on occasion. It makes no sense to me. But, then you have these microplastics and you have all these exogenous, materials that they put into the environment that we're exposed to. So all that stuff burdens the liver. So it diminishes our ability to go through the different phases of liver detoxification. So now we accumulate these toxins. So what happens? The body stores them, right? So the cells get sick and then the cells can't function. I'll give you an example. I think one of the most toxic organs in the body is the thyroid gland. It's like a lily pad. Everything jumps on it. And then the thyroid's trying to clean itself out. So it breaks down tissue and it ends up suffocating itself. And so that's why so many people have, Hashimoto's. I do x-rays on people all the time and I'll see calcified thyroid glands in my office. And then the patient is, I'm like, your thyroid's calcifying. So why is it calcified? Because it's getting damaged and the body's trying to lay down calcium to protect it. So then they said, well, my TSH looks fine because that's the standard, right? Just look at TSH. And TSH is not even a thyroid hormone. It's a pituitary gland hormone. So it doesn't even look at the thyroid, right? And so they don't look at antibodies until the TSH is like off the charts. So I think that the organs over time, the cells themselves, right? What makes up cells make up tissue, tissue makes up the organ. I truly believe that the cell is getting sick, and that in order for people to be healthy, you have to fix the cell, right? So that's where a lot of times, like you guys do with homeopathics, with saunas, with hyperbaric chambers. But again, it comes down to, why is the liver getting burdened? Because when the body's exposed to a toxin, it takes twice as much of a nutrient or a mineral to help the body aid in that detoxification. If they're already depleted, then the liver starts to accumulate, its garbage cans start to fill up. Now, certain people are born with an extreme amount of garbage cans that can fill up, right? It's the guy that goes out drinking. He can drink 9 beers and he's not even buzzed. I drink a half a beer and I get buzzed. Or there's somebody, right, years ago, I don't remember if you remember Tot. She had Lou Gehrig's disease, right?
I remember Tasha.
She lived in a colonial home in West Virginia. We ran her blood through Ryan Labs or whoever it was, I forget, and they sent it back saying it was tainted. And they said that there was more black mold in there than red blood cells. And like, you have an OSHA-based lab, and so there was no exposure to mold. But everybody in her family got tested for mold as well, and no one in her family had mold toxicity. Why? Because Tot just had she was burdened, and she had a limited ability, a limited capacity to detoxify. So who knows what the cause of ALS? Not as saying it's a bacteria, right? They're contributing to a certain bacteria, a specific strain of bacteria that drives that nervous system to attack itself, and people get Lou Gehrig's disease. But I think, again, it goes down to toxicity and nutrient deficiencies go hand in hand, right? And so I think that if the person is equipped to detoxify and they're eating healthy and they're eating right and they're eating foods that are rich in nutrients, right? Then I think their ability to detoxify is greater than somebody who doesn't.
A great point. And I want to just stay on this point about the cell. For those of you that have never heard this before, believe it or not, you have 30 trillion cells. That's a lot of cells. And these cells communicate. And when they don't communicate effectively because of everything that Dr. Kyle just talked about, nutritional deficiencies, toxicity, liver dysfunction not working well, thyroid being compromised. And, thyroid is the size of a butterfly, it's so small. Yet a lot of doctors only run a TSH, which is thyroid stimulating hormone, which is not a hormone of the thyroid. It's actually saying a message from the pituitary hypothalamus, make more thyroid or make less thyroid. It's really running a T3 and T4, free T3, free T4. And look, that's a complete picture because that's circulating in the bloodstream. But all of this has to do with cell-to-cell communication, and it boils down to one thing: oxidative stress. We've not talked about oxidative stress because that's really what you're talking about right now, is free radical damage, which we can do a whole show on that, by the way. And I agree with you. Where do you start? Right, a lot of information. Here's where you start. Basically, you make a decision to improve your health, and you take a step out of your comfort zone, and you get evaluated, and you start your journey that way. And nothing happens overnight. Everything takes time. The disease process can take time, and some individuals are a little more resilient, and some are not. And what we're seeing right now is younger people, because of the onslaught of advancements of technology, chemicals. My philosophy has always been, if you can't pronounce an ingredient on the back of that bottle that you're purchasing, don't buy it, right? It's a chemical. And I know you agree with that as well. So let's just continue this conversation, because now you assess your patients, you're looking at the x-rays, you're putting on a corrective care, you're talking about nutrition. I really want to focus this last segment on toxicity. I was taught when I was going through naturopathic training before I went to medical school, and to me, naturopathy encompasses looking at toxicity, and that toxicity is critically important. It's kind of a combination of working on nutritional deficiencies, but I believe that toxicity has to be addressed effectively, and there's different strategies. We talked about homeopathics. How do you put someone through a detoxification process, Dr. Kyle?
So can I just say a couple things?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I asked ChatGPT what were the 4 leading causes of all-cause mortality. First was stress. Second was malnutrition. Second was toxins. Toxins, what we're talking about. Third was malnutrition. Again, what we're talking about. If you're depleted, you can't detoxify. And fourth was physical inactivity. So typically, I assess the patient. If they have a lot of edema, if they have a lot of, I'd say, body fat, then the lymphatic chain, the lymphatic system, which is really not really spoken much of, it gets congested, right? The lymph takes toxins away from organs, and it helps the body excrete it, pushes it to the kidneys, through the breath, through the fecal matter, through the urine. So every patient that I start off with, I always detoxify them depending on their constitution. We may start off with gut stuff, but I usually start with the liver, because the 3 organs that get fatty are going to be the liver, the kidneys, and the pancreas. So I start with the liver because we want to dump the trash out so the body can kind of put more trash in there to get rid of it. Assessing the patient, if they have edema, swelling, if their rings leave impressions in their fingers, if their socks leave impressions in their calves. So that's a lymphatic issue. So I always do a lot of drainage, a lot of homeopathic stuff too, along with it, because you don't want to liberate toxins from the liver and the body can't excrete them, and they just recirculate them back into the tissue. They just move from one organ to the next. Now you're auto-intoxifying the patient. So they can get sick, and they can have a Herxheimer effect, right? So I start with maybe skin brushing, have them go into saunas, just moving, right? Because moving is one of physical activities. Most people don't move, right? Then you have the other caveat that somebody can't move because they're hurting, right? So you just can have them squeeze their muscles. But anyway, they can sit in a sauna, they can skin brush, they can do cold plunges, they can do light therapy, they can do all these different things. We have to aid in opening up those pathways so that the body can excrete. Once you start to take the burden off of them, I think that's when people can start to really see the benefit. They can start to heal, and a lot of the processes in the body can start to function optimally.
I totally agree with you. I think detoxification is pivotal when it comes to a optimal wellness plan. And a lot of individuals, practitioners are not really focusing on that. They're jumping right into, oh, let me give them this bioidentical hormone, or let me start this therapy right away. And I think you can do parts of that, but if you truly want to get a patient well, if you truly want that patient to achieve optimal health, there has to be conversation about detoxification, and we align philosophically on that as well. I'm a big believer in infrared sauna. We were one of the first clinics back in the late 90s to have infrared. I mean, the infrared's been around for a while. I don't want to say that we were the first ones, but we're really the first ones talking about it. Finland, believe it or not, I think the majority, like 90% of their households have, now they don't have infrared, they have traditional saunas. And I've always debated that. I'm more of an infrared type of person, but I do believe there could be benefit as well. I just don't think that high the heat, because it's unphysiological when you're close to 200 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm a big believer that it should be a lower heat and you'd last in there longer. There's been studies at Mayo talking about cardiovascular health, helping about the endothelial lining, releasing nitric oxide, end-stage heart patients that had like an ejection fraction of less than 20%, and they slowly kind of recovered just by going on a regimen. So there's a lot of benefits to infrared technology, but there's so many different things you can do right now. And I also think that working on liver detoxification, as you mentioned, I think here's really the key. The key is to make a decision. This is an investment of time and resources, but your health is worth it. There's no panacea. There's no miracle drug, although we do believe that medications do play a role at certain times helping that patient. But ultimately, and I know that you agree with this, is that detoxification is foundational. So we got a couple minutes left. I want to let you kind of give your words of wisdom. It's funny you mentioned ChatGPT, because a lot of Americans are now looking at chat, and I think there's a lot of positives to that. But here's the thing. At the end of the day, I think that you need to look for a skilled practitioner that can help guide you. You know, a lot of times, a really good example is I used to be in special forces in the military. I used to work out all the time. Right now, I have a trainer. I go in twice a week and they tell me what to do. Why? I know how to do everything, but they're directing me, they're coaching me. That's almost what I see a functional practitioner, because yeah, you can say I can do this on my own, but why aren't you doing it, right? What's your opinion on that?
Well, it's accountability. I think that today everybody's on a punch card. You know, you're on a clock. Somebody comes in, you got to see patients, or it's governed by how much reimbursement there is by an insurance, or you spend little time with the patient, so you don't even get to know them. I think what a patient really needs is somebody who cares about them, not somebody who, they don't really care what you know, but they want to know that you care. And you spend the time, right? A doctor's an educator, so you have to educate patients. You have to guide them. They're looking for guidance, right? So if you tell them, if you educate them the importance of detoxification, if you let them know, you know, all these different modalities, like with peptides and hormones, people come to me all the time and they're on hormones already, but their liver's not working. So what's going to happen? Those hormones are going to create toxicity in the body. The body's going to store them, right? So educating the patient is the first thing, I think, to really helping the patient get on a journey of healing. And I think having a systematic approach and having where you address different systems at different times are really going to help catapult that patient back to the road to recovery. That's number one. And I think that really practitioners need to spend more time. Me personally, I know that that's what patients say. I feel like he's the first practitioner that really listened to my problems or my concerns. And I think that that's what really that connection, like you said, having that accountability and having that coach really kind of will help the patient make the decision as whether or not they're going to trust you and listen to you. That's the most important thing.
That's a great advice, Dr. Fogel. Dr. Kyle Fogel, chiropractic physician, nutritional, functional expert, looking at root causes. Great, great advice. Hey, if you are motivated now to take action, just find a functional integrated practitioner. It could change your life. It doesn't happen overnight. It's a step-by-step process. There's a lot of multifactorial issues when it comes to chronic disease. Dr. Fogel, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on, educating, inspiring those And we're glad that you were able to join us in your busy schedule. Hey, this is Rethink My Health, getting to the root cause of advanced chronic diseases. And as I say time and time again, a cheerful heart is good medicine, but a crushed spirit dries the bones. Don't be crushed, be happy, and have a great day. See you guys next week.